Viewer contributions make local programming possible on WNIN. Become a member of WNIN with your contribution so we can continue to make this programming available. Visit WNIN.org and click on the donate button.
The Indiana General Assembly wrapped up their session early Friday morning with the passage of the two-year state budget. We'll talk about what's included and not included in the budget and other legislative issues with Indiana State Representative Alex Burton and Indiana State Senator Vanita Becker. WNIN Lawmakers starts right now. We're joined now by Indiana State Senator Vanita Becker, who represents Warwick County and a part of Vanderburgh County, along with Indiana State Representative Alex Burton, who represents parts of Evansville. Thank you both so much for being here. I know it has been a long week, a long evening for you both, and we appreciate you making some time for us. So let's get right into it. A lot of moving parts. The first of which I wanted to talk about, obviously we have now an approved budget. Let's start with the property tax reform, and what did that look like? That was kind of the cornerstone, if you will, of Governor Braun's agenda. That's expected, at least what it looks like now, expected to reduce state revenue by about $1.8 billion over the next 3 years. What are your initial reactions to that property tax reform? Well,
I don't think people are going to see that much savings or cut in their property taxes. I didn't vote for the bill because I didn't really think it was doing much. The average homeowner will maybe save up to $300 unless you are a disabled veteran. But it also hurts local government, and the city will have to make some really tough decisions because you could also see your property tax cut, but you could also see an income tax increase. So I wasn't real crazy about the proposal, the way they did it.
Yeah, and I have the same sentiments. You know, coming directly from local government, this really puts a squeeze on local government to now make a whole lot of tough decisions, but then also capping how much local governments are able to bond really just creates a problem that is going to lead to an increase of local taxes.
Why do you think this was such a priority for Governor Braun coming in? Obviously,
well, because he campaigned on it, and I think he heard from a lot of people, probably around Indianapolis. That's why we had the last big cut when at that time they increased sales tax by a penny, and that was also supposed to help funding for education. But the taxes in Indianapolis, as you may know, are a lot higher than what they are here.
Senator Becker, you broke with your own party. They have the trifecta, as you know, the majority in the House, the representatives, they control the governorship. So you're breaking with your party. Can you explain why you didn't perhaps agree with some of your Republican colleagues?
I could see how it was going to hurt local government, and also because all you have to do is look at, maybe we're going to get $200 or $300 in property tax savings, but you're going to end up having an increase in local taxes to offset that, and so you're not going to end up with much of a cut in the long run. Okay.
Let's move on. I know we've got a lot to get to. We've heard for years that Indiana has this large rainy day fund, a surplus, if you will. We know that at the end of the day, last week we heard that this budget forecast was then revised to over $2 billion less expected revenue. Why was there such a big swing? And I think this is such an important question, particularly for viewers at home who have been listening and hearing that there's this surplus of sorts. And we learned last week there's a $2 billion deficit. Can you help educate myself, educate the viewers at home? Where's the discrepancy here?
Well, mostly I think it's the Trump administration's paying, just trying to decide whether or not to have tariffs and when. And if you looked at the stock market and what has happened with the stock market, it's really hurt a lot of people's retirement accounts. People thought they were going to be you know, you heard him say he was going to stop the war on the first day of his administration between Ukraine and Russia, and of course that didn't happen, and it's not going to happen. Plus, unfortunately, I think he favors Putin over Ukraine, which is sad. And so when you talk about tariffs, tariffs are just another way that local people are going to pay the taxes. It's a tax on goods. That's really what it boils down to. So I think people were afraid. They're very fearful right now when they see the stock market do what it's doing and what their accounts have gone down to. So that really puts a lot of uneasiness in people's minds. You know, it may get better, but it's not going to get better quick.
Representative Burton.
Yeah, and to that point, I was reading something the other day. Between December and now, the state has lost $800 million just from all the uncertainty and the tariffs that come into play. And people may not realize it, but we're the third largest supplier to China, and so that's impacting our economy more than what people may realize.
So with this, obviously with the projected loss in revenue, we know that there were some pretty significant, dramatic cuts made to the state budget that ultimately we know passed the General Assembly early Friday morning. Wanted to dig into some of those changes. Particularly, we wanted to start with public health and higher education. We know those were both cut drastically. The WNIN grants from a higher education perspective that would allow certain students to afford their tuition dollars. What is your message to people at home who are seeing these cuts, who are about to send, maybe a student off to college, who are concerned about, generally speaking, when we talk about public health? What do you tell your constituents right now at home who are watching this? Senator Becker, let's start with you.
Well, first of all, they started with the, if you read Michael Hicks, and he's an economist at Ball State, he had a column in 2 weeks ago about how Indiana has a brain drain. And he's saying that because his point is that Indiana has not adequately funded education for a long time. And so fewer kids are going to college. And part of that is the expense. And part of it is that with the automotive plants we have, and they can make it more money or just as much money without a college education in some of these areas. So I think, but I'm concerned about the brain drain because we need to provide better education for young people so that they will stay here. And that's one of the things about U of E or USI, either one. If somebody goes to school there, they're more likely to stay here because they find opportunities. So it is an important issue, and we need to have more money for education. If you look at it, the increase in K-12 funding was only like 4% in the first year. Actually, it was 2 and 2. It just depends on the complexity index, how many people are special ed, how many people are on free and reduced lunches. But now we're also passing, which I did not support, but unfortunately it's in the budget bill because it was one of Braun's big things to make Indiana fully choice so that even a millionaire can get a voucher to send their kid to a private or parochial school. And most of them, it's just going to give them a tax break because they're already sending their kids to those private schools. So it's not been good for public education.
Sure. Representative Burton, what do you tell your constituents at home right now?
Yeah, we have to get serious, starting at pre-K through 13. I'm saying 13 because we need to look beyond that high school graduation point and really set our kids up for success going into whatever career that they want to go into. This has been very frustrating from my perspective. Yes, it's my first session, but the conversation and just the overall direction of where we're putting and investing our money just doesn't align to where a majority of Hoosiers are. 90% of our kids are in our public schools, and yet here we are making 10% of the population, student population, get universal access to vouchers, right? So if Elon Musk sent his kids to school in Indiana, it'd be fully taken care of, which he has the means to take care of without public dollars, and our public schools are the ones that are losing in this budget.
Let's move on. I know that the cigarette tax increase of $2 per pack. This was also a big deal. This was in there to offset revenue. How do we feel about that increase, $2 a pack?
Well, it's going to raise $380 million for the state to help offset the cuts that we were. If we hadn't raised the cigarette tax, we would probably still be there. And nobody likes to raise taxes. But also, when you look at our Medicaid budget, which has doubled since the last biennium, that's eating up more and more of our state revenues. And so you have to replace that revenue somehow, ultimately. And so people who smoke also contribute most to the health care cost in the state of Indiana. So I think that's one reason. We're still around the same as the states around us. I said we ought to just bite the bullet and increase alcohol taxes as well. It doesn't raise as much money, but I've been in the legislature 42 years, and we have never increased the alcohol tax. And most people, if they go to buy a six-pack of beer or a bottle of wine, they're not going to miss a few pennies on the cost of a bottle, but we didn't do that.
Representative Burton, your thoughts on the $2 per pack increase for cigarettes?
Yeah, if we're truly going to make Indiana healthy again, to Senator Becker's point, then okay with the cigarette tax, but to that point, we also need to look at the alcohol liquor tax, and even potentially, if we're trying to make Indiana healthy, looking at sodas that are more than 20 ounces, putting a tax on that as well. We can't just pick and choose and say, oh, cigarettes bad, and not look at all the things that are happening. We have to just really get serious about this and figure out what this strategy moving forward is. Just this time right now is so uncertain that we really have to be putting everything on the table to make sure that there's not one segment of the population being overburdened as it relates to taxes than others.
You're both sitting right now in a studio, public broadcasting studio here at WNIN. Unfortunately, as part of those budget cuts, WNIN is projected to lose close to $446,000 each over the next 2 years. It's something that the president and CEO, Tim Black, says, quote, "We're not going to shut our doors, but it is an extremely difficult amount of money for us to find." It's not.
How much did they normally typically get received? Do you know?
I don't have that off the top of my head, Senator Becker. I apologize. It's not a great. It's an extremely difficult amount of money to find, as you can imagine. That's almost $500,000,
especially for a not-for-profit.
And programs like the ones that you both are appearing on right now would unfortunately likely be some of the first to go away with, to get affected. So, here you are. You're both sitting here. What do you say? What do you have to say? And what would your message be to viewers at home who might be concerned about this?
Well, I really didn't hear about it until Thursday, as far as they should have contacted us.
Who's they?
WNIN. Statewide, all the stations, because they all got a cut. All of the public broadcasting stations throughout the state.
Funding, correct? Yes.
Because it affected all of them. And typically, they lobby. They come and see us and talk to us. And, that's really what gets the attention of the leadership, if enough people in the caucus speak up. And, I know it's costly to pay for a lobbyist, but typically, I think they normally do, because I can remember being approached in the past when we've had tough sessions.
Senator Becker, do you, to your point, do you think that the lobbyists would have helped? But are you concerned though about the cuts, just generally
In
speaking?
general, because this public broadcasting is important to people, and there are programs that aren't on anywhere else. There's a lot of mysteries. There's a lot of educational programs. So I think it will be detrimental to the public. Absolutely.
Representative Burton, your thoughts on the cuts to public broadcasting?
Yeah. At the very least, this is an eye-opener, not only to us as being elected, but those who are viewing this broadcast. We, as a society, have to get serious about the direction that we want to see society move in. There's been a lot of uncertain things and really troubling things happening that just are outside of the norm. Seeing public broadcasting take a hit, losing, spending more money and losing money at the expense of tariffs and just so much uncertainty is just troubling and really puts all of us on edge. And we have to figure out a way to move forward that makes sense but doesn't put too much of a burden on the families and those who are already up to their necks with bills, whether they're property taxes or utility bills. We have to figure this out. And though session is over, the conversations continue.
Mm-hmm.
We will move on. I know we could continue, but there's so much more to speak with you both about. A big takeaway too, I think, from this session was the IEDC, the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. That was significantly cut from the budget. But what effects could we perhaps see from that? Representative Burton, do you want to start here?
Yeah, I mean, it's looking in terms of what it in essence, it's the Department of Commerce for the state. But there have been some questionable things happening under that umbrella, and so it's under review, which I'm totally in support of. But moving forward, we really probably need to narrow the scope. And if I had my way in this scenario, I would absolutely love to see our IEDC looking at huge apartment complexes that are substandard, and making sure that we're able to provide safe, quality, affordable housing for Hoosiers who are barely making it and are paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month in their utility bills. We have to find a way forward to take care of Hoosiers in these uncertain economic times.
Senator Becker.
Well, and that it is an issue, and we have a housing trust fund, and some of that money could have been used there as well. But I think, as Alex said, there's been questionable expenditures. They're doing an audit of the IEDC. That's really top on Braun's list, is to look at all the funding toward the end of the Holcomb. And I don't think Holcomb did anything wrong, but I think sometimes you need to have more oversight on these agencies and commissions. And so I think it's important and it's positive that they're reviewing this just to see exactly where all the money went. That's a lot of money. But one of the heads of the, I'm trying to think of his name, but he ended up leaving the commission to run for governor. And so...
Brad Chambers, I think.
Brad Chambers, yes. That's it. And so when that happened, it sort of put that organization in flux. And so they're going to have to look at it and make sure that they have enough oversight over it. It has done some good things for the state of Indiana, but we need to make sure that transparency is there.
Sure. A lot more to get to, not related this time on the budgetary matters. This was tacked onto the bill at the last minute. It included giving the governor more control over the board of trustees at public universities across the state. Obviously, the University of Southern Indiana, the largest public institution here in Southwest Indiana and Evansville. What are the ramifications of this, and why do you think this was put on to the larger budget bill, even though it's not necessarily budgetary?
Well, IU has, USI is always, their trustees have always been appointed by the governor. But IU had a different governance body, and their trustees were elected by the alumni. And, you know, DEI is no longer in the Republican vocabulary. And so I think it's a way to get more control over the universities. You might have noticed that, which university is it nationally that said? Harvard.
Mm-hmm.
They said, we're not doing this. I mean, it's been like from the top down, they want to change the culture.
Mm-hmm.
Really, you need to have independent thinking. That's what college is all about, is so that people can grow and learn from other people.
You mentioned that DEI, and Representative Burton, I want to get your take on this more scaled-back version of banning diversity, equity, and inclusion passed by the General Assembly. What was included in that final bill? Is that something that you supported?
It was not something that I supported, but I am grateful that it did not pass as what Senator Byrne introduced.
That's right.
There was a lot of conversation behind closed doors, and if I'm being honest, that is probably the one piece of legislation that I spent the most time working with my colleagues on the House to dilute, if you will. You know, at a time when people just want to feel seen and heard, this legislation and this national narrative has came into play. And so we scaled back as much as we could, you know, sitting in the Judiciary Committee or hearing testimony for over 3 hours from various persons coming in. It really weighed on me heavy, but I'm grateful that what is going to be put on the governor's desk is less than what it would have been had it gone through in the original version over in the Senate.
Senator Becker, is that something that you supported?
No.
Okay.
I did not. I think personally it's just another way to discriminate. You just call it something else. And there were several Republicans who did not support this piece of legislation. I believe in diversity, and most women do. Maybe because historically we've been discriminated against a lot. And there are barriers. Race has always been a way to discriminate, historically too. And you can't change that just by calling it something else. It's just another way to discriminate from the other side.
I know that we previously had touched on the cost of school vouchers a little bit earlier. We had talked about that. But I'm also curious about what some of this legislation will do as we talk about school funding and just the kind of the overall funding. Are you both concerned as we look ahead to the next fiscal year? Are you concerned about the students of the state being able to get into college?
I'm concerned about when this starts, it's going to be $93 to $96 million a year. And that's for people who can afford to send their kids to a private school already. This is for millionaires. You know, right now you can already, people making up to $230,000 a year qualify. When this program started, and I was there when it started, and I have never supported vouchers, because I think if you want to fund them, fine, but you shouldn't be taking money away from public education where 95% of our students attend public schools. And so just the vouchers alone is $450 million a year.
Significant, very much so. Representative Burton, did you have anything else to share on the school voucher side of things?
Yeah, just kind of echoing what Senator Becker said. You know, that's almost $500 million with a B that could be going into our public schools and really meeting the needs of our students. Is every public school perfect? No, but I think there's an opportunity to educate our kids. Should be an opportunity for our kids to be educated in a way that best aligns to their needs and what they want to do and outcomes ultimately. And so that'll be something that I'll continue to advocate for, making sure that our public schools have exactly what they need to thrive and make sure that every student coming through their doors has what they need.
Well, there's not as much accountability with the charters or private schools or virtual schools. We also have virtual schools, and they're funded at 85% of what brick and mortar schools are funded at, which makes no sense to me when you're watching online. But we have also seen there was a case a few years ago where virtual charters bilked the state out of $150 million in funding for their programs. And I think they finally caught up with those people, but they didn't pay the money back. I think they're in jail now. But there needs to be more oversight. If you're going to get public funding, then they ought to have a school board. They ought to have people that they answer to. And right now it's not out there like that.
We have just very limited time, but I wanted to give you each time to give your kind of parting message to viewers at home. Senator Becker, I wanted to start with you. This is the party, the Republican Party that you are affiliated with. At the end of the day, this is their budget. They're in control of both chambers and the governorship. What do you tell people at home who are watching this, who are watching the news, that might be disappointed perhaps in Republican leadership from their opinion?
I think they should lobby the leadership in the House and the Senate and let them know that they don't necessarily agree with their positions on things. You know, I'm a Republican, but that doesn't mean I have to agree with my party on everything. And I don't always agree. I'm a very independent Republican. I represent my constituents, or I wouldn't be there 42 years.
What do you tell your constituents who might be nervous or scared or upset about the news? I'm just curious.
I tell them that I share their concern. I think for a lot of people, they just want someone to hear them. And if I get phone calls, I call people back. And I talked to a lady who was very concerned. She's pro-choice, and there is a movement to, within the State Board of Health, there's a lawsuit pending right now where people want to know who got an abortion and who didn't. But if that's public, and it shouldn't be public, it's someone's personal health care records. So there's a lawsuit right now, and there's an injunction against doing that, against telling that. But I talked to a lady this week from Newburgh who was very concerned about this, and she said, you know, I think you're the first person that I've talked to that understands what I'm saying. I just don't think we should allow those records to become public. And I agree with her. Your personal medical records, and especially in a small town, there are very few abortions performed in Indiana now, especially after the ban that was passed 2 years ago. And so people are more concerned. If there's fewer people and you have access to those records about where they live, it would be fairly easy for people to figure out who it was.
Sure.
And that's not good. People's, their decisions, a lot of it's health care. You have deformed fetuses that are not going to live outside the womb. And that, so people who have an abortion, they don't know what the circumstances were. That's not part of the medical record. It's name and address. So I just think that we're going at the wrong direction.
Well, thank you for sharing that example of that phone call you took. And I want to give Representative Burton a time as well. A question just about your overall message to your constituents at home who are watching, who might be concerned, nervous. Some of them perhaps could be happy about the changes they're seeing. You get all sides of the spectrum here. What do you tell them watching right now?
Yeah, I'm sure for anyone who's watched us today, there's a Republican and Democrat who are sitting down having, a recap of this, General Assembly, who are fighting for the people, who have some differences, but in essence, we want to make sure that Southwest Indiana thrives. And so we're working together to make sure that is happening and really sharing voicing our opinions to our respective parties and chambers. So it's been an honor to serve alongside Senator Becker, and there's a lot more work to do for sure.
Many more sessions ahead for you. I know that Representative Alex Burton of Evansville, State Senator Vanita Becker over Warwick County and some of Vanderburgh County. Thank you both for making time. I know that it's been a long week, and we, again, really appreciate you carving out just a little bit of time to talk with us today.
We appreciate you, and thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.